Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm Adrienne Klein. I am the Programs and Operations Specialist here at the Oregon Bioscience Incubator. In this Lunch and Learn, this is our number 3, our final of the Biotech Business Bootcamp series. So we're so excited to get started with that today. But first, we have some housekeeping. So audio and video, if you can please stay muted, and then stay on mute until we get to the Q&A portion, and you can ask your questions then. And if you have any questions, you can also put those in the chat, and we will take care of those once we get to the Q&A section. Also joining us today from OBI is Renee Miller. She is the Associate Director, and she will be putting her LinkedIn in the chat as well as mine. We encourage you guys to connect with us. We would love to do that. Land acknowledgement. So OBI and Otrati would like to acknowledge the land that we are all on, wherever you may be. Otrati conducts business throughout Portland and beyond and is making an effort to acknowledge the history of the area and work towards decolonization of the bioscience industry. To learn more about Portland's native, diverse, and vibrant community, please read Leading with Tradition, a document created by the Portland Indian Leaders Roundtable. And we're going to put a link to that in the chat as well, so you can check it out. I'd love to go over some upcoming events. These are the final events of 2024 for OBI. Coming up on the 5th of December, we have our happy hour event, which is very fun and well attended, and I highly recommend that everyone come check it out. Again, it's the final happy hour of the year. Coming up for our next virtual Lunch and Learn, we have Startup Missteps, real scenarios from a VC's experience. And so we've got 2 VCs that are coming on to give us real life case studies. I think that'll be exciting. And of course, you can check out our events on our website as well. At the end of this Lunch and Learn, when you go to click out, a survey is going to pop up. And I would love it if you would take just a couple moments to fill out the survey, because that helps us decide what kind of programs we're going to bring to you and make sure that they fit your needs. But before we dive in, we're going to do a poll. Okay, so today's poll is, what kind of potato are you today? So are you feeling like a French fry? Maybe you're feeling like a tater tot. But let us know by joining in with the poll and let us know how you're feeling today. Okay, it looks like we've got some hash browns. Okay, we're mostly feeling like a hash brown, a bit scattered but delicious. I love that. That's perfect. Okay, so in this Lunch and Learn, Tara Dahl joins us for the final session of a 3-part series that will equip you with the essential tools needed to navigate the complexities of the biotech industry. To check out the previous session of our boot camps, we will share a link in the chat, but you can check that out on our YouTube channel. All right, so Tara, the Executive Director of the Oregon TechWorks Association, brings a wealth of experience and a deep commitment to fostering growth within Oregon's tech community. With a background in management, organizational leadership, and a diverse range of skills in sales development and event planning, she is dedicated to empowering businesses to thrive. Tara's expertise in guiding startups and established companies alike makes her a valuable resource for those looking to advance their biotech ventures. Her passion for connecting people and driving innovation is at the heart of her work, making her a key figure in Oregon Tech's ecosystem. So we're also going to put her LinkedIn in the chat as well as OTA's LinkedIn in the chat so you can follow them. But without further ado, please welcome Tara.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. Hello, everyone. It's really nice to be with you guys for the 3rd and final session today. And I know that Renee put those links to the previous sessions in the chat. So if you haven't checked out the first 2, I definitely say go give it a listen. So you can get. So as I was saying, we started with, in this first session, we talked about getting your startup off the ground with your financial management strategy as well as your marketing strategy. In session 2, we talked about, okay, now that you're ready to hire and bring employees on, what are some effective strategies for that? And how can you find the people you're looking for and give them what they need to be successful at your company? And so today we're going to kind of round that out and wrap that up with some of the more fundamental things that you need for your biotech startup with HR, payroll. We'll kind of touch back on benefits just a little bit, and then retirement as well. And just as a caveat, I know enough about these things to be dangerous, but I am certainly not an expert. So if you have additional questions, please reach out to me and I can connect you with the folks that truly have expertise in these areas. So today we'll talk about the introduction to HR essentials. We will talk about payroll management basics. We will recap employee benefits and we'll talk about retirement plans and overviews. And then there actually are just a couple of key business owner considerations that I want to go over that everyone owning a business, no matter if it's biotech or anything else, should definitely keep in mind when they're moving forward. And then we'll end with some Q&A. So for HR essentials. So HR, there are quite a few functions of an HR professional, and having that role in your company is critical as you start to build out your employee base and bring on your workforce. So they do everything from managing employee recruitment to tracking performance, maintaining employee records, and facilitating training and development, as well as a much wider breadth of things. And administering employee benefits and running payroll are just among another, couple of functions that they do. One of the biggest things that HR professionals do for your business are maintaining legal compliance. So that's everything to do with employment laws, harassment, discrimination, all of those kinds of things. You want to have someone on your team or in your court that's going to make sure all of those boxes are checked and that nothing is being done below board so that fines can occur and worse things. For another thing that you want to make sure that you do I'm so sorry, my dog is bothering me. Go lay down, please. Another thing that HR wants to do is standardize the process and try to automate things as much as possible. So that's everything from the onboarding and hiring process, interviewing process, everything that you can do to possibly make the job easier for yourself or for your HR professional, that role. In terms of standardizing the process and automating it will only help to set you up for success in the long run. Now, people always ask, like, do I have to have an in-house HR person? When you get to a certain size, when your company has grown to a certain size, certainly that is a helpful thing to have, is just to hire someone and bring them on internally. But lots of startups are not at that point and they won't be for a long time. And so there's definitely things that you can do to kind of piece that together and have those roles fulfilled without hiring someone internally. So there are companies out there that will do fractional HR services. If you've heard of a fractional CFO, or sometimes there are things called co-managed IT, it's where you are you're outsourcing that to another company who can then come in and commit a certain number of hours or functions to your company and fulfill those HR functions. Another thing you can do is if you have a key point person within your company, and this is a lot of startups, I see this all the time, where it will mostly be an operations person or sometimes a CEO, but a lot of times they'll get passed over to an operations person, but someone who is fulfilling another role, but then also has the role of HR and doing these functions. There are things out there that can help with that. And so there are platforms, there are certain software companies that can help give those people the tools that they need so that they're not floundering and not knowing what they're doing in terms of HR. Like at TechWorks, we have a software that we're able to offer all of our members. And that software platform allows anyone to fulfill HR functions and to get the content and the resources they need, even if they are not an HR professional themselves. And so that really helps fill the gaps for a lot of companies who haven't yet gotten to the point where they're going to be hiring that HR person internally. So one of the things, and this goes hand in hand, HR and payroll, they go hand in hand. More often than not, the HR person is handling payroll and setting that up. And so just some things to consider with payroll is that you want to set it up and be compliant. So you need to make sure that you are establishing all of the guardrails around payroll, including meeting legal requirements, and ensuring that all of your policies are set so that you have a regular payday, you know how your company is handling overtime and all of the deductions that come with payroll. Having that regular payday set so that you're being compliant with wages for each employee. And again, with overtime laws, those vary state by state. And so that's another thing that an HR person wants to do is make sure, again, going back to legality and compliance, that all of those state by state rules are followed. You have your federal laws and your state laws. And if you are a company, let's say you're headquartered in Oregon, but you're hiring employees in other states that are working remotely for you, it is still your responsibility as a company and really as an HR professional to make sure that all of those employees know and have the resources they need, that they're following all of those state laws and that you as a company are following those state laws. Back to payroll, so automating the process, so making sure that payroll is going out on time to each employee and nothing's coming up late or short. And then with all the payroll tax compliance and record keeping, these are really important again, because if you have a employee in Oregon who has to pay Oregon income tax, but you have an employee in Washington and they don't pay Washington income tax, you need to know as a company where those fine lines are and what the legality is around that. So there's lots and lots of different compliance issues and regulations that go around payroll. Some of the biggest things to keep in mind, though, are if you have an HR person doing that for you, great. And if not, and if you are doing that for your company, or you have like a business partner doing it for your company, to make sure you have the resources you need that you're staying compliant. Something else to consider when selecting your payroll service. So a lot of companies will start out with QuickBooks. That's a super common thing, a super common payroll service that many, many companies use. I myself have used it. I have been paid by QuickBooks. But there are times when you are growing as a company, you may need to reevaluate and look at other software options. And there are lots of companies out there. The biggest thing you want to make sure is that you are choosing a publicly traded company. You know, they have that reputation and that they are themselves following all of the rules and laws that they need to as a payroll company, and that they're scalable. And so what that means is that it's not just going to work for you as a company of 4 or 5 today, but that they're also going to work for you as a company of 25 or 30 plus down the road, right? So a lot of companies will get wrapped up in a smaller payroll service that, you know, works for the time being. It works because they're a small company. They don't need a whole lot. But as you grow and scale, you want to make sure that your software is keeping up with that. And so that means other software integrations. Does it work with your benefits platform? Does it work with your retirement platform? All of those things are something to keep in mind as you're looking to bring on a payroll service or a software that you'll be using for the long term, because it is a headache to try to move all that stuff over when you're already in a cycle of doing things, and then you run into a hiccup or a few hiccups that you just can't ignore anymore, and you know you need to make the switch. It can be very time consuming and costly. So just some things to consider when you are going out to the market to look for different payroll services. So just want to recap on benefits. And we talk about trying to, we're hiring employees and we want to retain them, and we want to make sure that they're satisfied so that they stay for the long run. We also touched on the last session when we talked all about employee benefits that the biotech market is very competitive. It's a hard market to hire in because you're oftentimes having to hire from other markets, and it's a very specialized industry. So you are needing to be very specific about who you're bringing on to your company and to your team. So it's become more important than ever, I would say, especially in the last 4 years or so, to have benefits that your employees want to stay at your company for. It's just the way things have gone is that benefits have become very, very important to people. And so when we talk about benefits, a lot of times people automatically think just healthcare, right? And that's certainly a slice of the pie, is healthcare. So health, dental, and vision. Those are the core benefits that you can offer. They do help provide financial protection for your employees and as well as essential services. And it lets your employees know that you value their well-being and their health. But that's just a slice of it, right? There are other benefits, and companies have gotten really creative in terms of what they want to offer. So obviously with PTO, many companies have moved more towards a flexible time off policy, or open time off policy rather than a set number. There's wellness programs. So, and this is where employers have gotten really creative with offering things like gym memberships or a subscription to a software like Calm or the Headspace app, right? So really getting creative on what kinds of things you can offer employees that let them know you value them as a whole person, aside from just a paycheck. Parental leave is another big one. And we're seeing a lot of tug and pull now on work-life balance in terms of flexible work. So where are people working? Do you have a flexible work from home policy, or are you requiring someone to be in an office 5 days a week? That's something we're seeing really trending right now. It's kind of big. I don't know if you've all been following, like with Amazon has mandated all their employees back 5 days a week now. And there's a lot of opinions about that. Maybe it's a weed out process or maybe not, but just that kind of thing is now something that as employees, they're considering when they're going to look at an employer. Am I going to be expected to be in a desk, in a chair 5 days a week for 8 hours or more? Or do I have that flexibility to kind of be able to work, right, from home or from another location and still be able to take care of the life things around me that I need to take care of? And like I mentioned before, seeing that biotech is so competitive, it's just one of those things that you want to consider as an employer when you're looking to bring on that talent. What are some things I can do to kind of sweeten the deal? Not just obviously with the work that you do. Now, hopefully that's the biggest catch is the work that you do, and you're bringing on that talent for that, but just giving people a reason to stay versus moving to a competitor. And so benefits are a huge, huge part of that. Okay, so retirement plans. Now, this again is where I know enough to be a little bit dangerous, and I just want to preface that. So there are kind of two main buckets that a retirement plan can fall into. And as employers, it's really important to know this because Oregon passed a law just a couple of years ago called Oregon Saves, and it's a retirement plan mandate, okay? It is mandatory that every single employer, no matter how big or small, you could have one employee, but you are mandated to offer this retirement savings option, and it's called Oregon Saves. Now, the other key thing about this is that employees are automatically opted in, and they have to opt themselves out, okay? So if they're automatically opted in and they don't opt themselves out, then you are responsible for making sure those deductions come from their paycheck to go to Oregon Saves. They send you, the employer, and they send the employee all the paperwork on it when you do a hire. And it is something that Oregon has done to ensure that every single Oregonian has access to a retirement plan, whether their company offers an employer-sponsored plan or not. So for example, so my day job is I'm the executive director at Oregon Tech Works Association, but I moonlight as a gym coach. So an example of this from last year, I started working for a gym last summer. They only had about 5 or 6 employees at the time. They were brand new. And when they opened, even though I have a regular job where I have a retirement plan and all of that, I have that 40-hour like full-time job. I still was opted in automatically to Oregon Saves. And so I had to go in and opt myself out because I have a retirement plan and I'm not worried about it. So I had to go in and do that for myself. So that is something that everyone who's going to be hiring even one person needs to keep in mind, is that this is something you'll be responsible for making sure is administered to your employees. And this is actually a great option. It gives employees another thing, if you're a small biotech company, you don't have the resources yet to do an employer-sponsored plan, that is okay, because this still allows your employees to have a way to save for that retirement without you having to contribute anything to it. So it's a beautiful thing that they've done for Oregon employees. On the flip side, so the other bucket we talk about is employer-sponsored plans. This is where you as an employer are sponsoring that retirement plan. And so there are a few different options here. You have the simple IRA, the SEP IRA, and the 401k. Basically, it's pre-tax money versus tax deferred contributions. That's kind of the breakdown of that. As an employer, you get to decide, will you be contributing to this plan? Are you doing a match? What's your percentage? Is it going to be equal amongst all levels of employment? And so that is where a good retirement broker comes into play to help you figure out what's going to be the best option for your company and for your employees. Because you obviously want to make sure it's financially responsible for your company as well, and that you have the resources and capability to do this, and still make it worthwhile for your employees. So a few different options there. And probably what everyone's really the most familiar with is the 401k. That seems to be the most common one, most popular amongst companies. So when it comes to retirement, it's no longer a if you will offer, it's what kind you will offer, right? So you're going to do Oregon Saves, which makes sense for a lot of small companies. At TechWorks, we have a retirement plan, and we don't see a lot of companies kind of wanting to move to that unless they have at least 10 or more. So then you get to that threshold, then you're like, okay, this is probably something we should, as a company, start contributing to our employees' retirement plans. But really, I don't see a lot of it below that threshold, just because it really just doesn't fiscally make sense for a while. So, key business owner considerations. I did not actually have much exposure to this until very recently, and I'll give you a story on that. But there's a few things that as a company, you're starting out, you have a business, you have employees now, you want to make sure you have some things in place. One of them being a buy-sell agreement and how that's being funded. So a buy-sell agreement, if you are in business with somebody, a business partner, this will protect your business by ensuring that it continues if one person passes away or needs to exit. And this doesn't even have to be necessarily with a partner. This is just if you own a business, okay? So recently, a TechWorks company, we just experienced this with one of our companies. Very unfortunately, one of the owner of one of our member companies, he passed away unexpectedly and suddenly. what that meant for him, he didn't have any of this in place. It was very unfortunate because he was had an estranged wife that they were going through a divorce. Well, everything kind of got shuttled over to her, and it just became this kind of awful, chaotic situation. Their employees almost lost their benefits because no one was there to administrate any of this stuff. And it was kind of a mess. So you definitely want to make sure, especially if you're in business with a partner, or even if you're not, you have a succession plan. What happens if suddenly you're not able to be part of the business anymore, or your partner isn't, right? So who takes ownership of what? How does the business continue? And actually, my husband and I are going through this right now with his company. So he owns a company, and he and I have recently gotten married, and he and his business partner are now trying to rework things and figure out what their buy-sell agreement is going to be going forward now that my husband and I are married and we have a child on the way. So it's just very practically, as a business owner, making sure you're doing those checkpoints along the way of just kind of check in and okay, here, we did this paperwork, maybe a year, 2, 3 years ago. Let's check in on it and make sure we have the things set in place that are going to make sense now going forward, right? And so wanting to make sure you have everything set in line with that. There's also key person insurance. So this is like, if if you have a business partner, if someone, a key person in your company is not able to work anymore due to death or disability, what happens to that workload? What happens to that, to the company, with the removal of that person for a time, or indefinitely. So you want to make sure you've got that set up for your company as well. And then disability and continuation insurance, which a lot of employers are pretty familiar with disability insurance, but I don't think that they understand that even the business owner should have some kind of a policy set in place so that the business can continue without them if it needs to, right? So things to consider. And like I said, I'll be honest, this is not something I even had a thought of until very recently with my own experience and then with the our TechWorks company. And it's kind of a wake-up call. It makes you go, oh, you might be going along someday, and you just never know. The unthinkable can happen. So you want to make sure that you're prepared, any partners you have are prepared, as well as your company as a whole is prepared for any kind of shakeup like that. So not necessarily the most fun thing to try to think about or plan for, but it is still important. And so coming back around just a little bit, touching on what we talked about last session is compliance. And so this does tie hand in hand with HR, because an HR professional or an HR role in your company is going to be the person who's mostly responsible for compliance. And if you don't have that HR person, then it definitely falls on company owners or CEOs or COOs, the people who are handling kind of the legal aspect of it. Now, registered agent service, it's not a sexy topic to talk about, but it's one that's really important because there are a lot of legal issues that can go along with not having a registered agent entity, right? So if you are hiring in another state, even Washington, let's say, right? So you're an Oregon company and you hire a Washington employee and they live and work in Washington remotely. You still want to make sure that you have that registered agent entity to can act on your behalf in any kind of a legal situation. And this is becoming a really crucial thing that businesses aren't maybe considering as we're hiring more globally, right? And so there are so many companies that are hiring from all over the country. My role before this, I worked for a company that was headquartered in Connecticut, but I was the only employee in Oregon. And guess what? They had to have a registered agent entity in Oregon because I worked here and lived here. And so that is someone who will handle any legal document if you are being sued in that state or anything in terms of compliance, that they can handle that. Registered agent service also will handle like your annual filings, business licensing, all kinds of stuff like that. So it's definitely something that you want to consider as you grow as a company. Touched on annual reporting and business licensing, but also just there are compliance tools out there for HR and payroll. One of the things that I think a lot of people miss, and I've had this conversation with several of our companies who are quite small, and they don't have an HR person in-house, right? That internal person, they just don't have the capacity for that. So they have someone who is managing all those functions, but they're not necessarily an HR professional. It's just not in their wheelhouse, but they're trying to make that work. And we see that with a lot of startups. It's very, very common. But there are still things like I touched on earlier that you need to know as a company, because they don't let you off the hook just because you're not an HR person. So let's say you are hiring in other states, you need to make sure that you have all of those posters. And we've all seen them when we're in the office and we're in a company. You have those posters up in the break room or wherever that tell you what your meal break rights are and overtime and all of that. Those still apply even if you're hiring remotely. Okay, so you want to make sure that all of your employees, no matter what state they live in, have access to both federal and the state that they live in, those posters and those laws. There are ways to post them digitally, so you can get them and, post them on kind of a shared drive that all employees have access to. You can email them out, things like that. It's just super critical that you keep up on that and make sure that's available, because what you don't want to have is some kind of an issue come up and then the employee can come around and be like, well, I didn't have access to my poster. You can get in trouble for that. So that's something we want to avoid. Same thing with mandatory trainings. So I do a lot of work with, like I said, companies who they might have one employee in Washington. Well, Washington and California, they require mandated yearly sexual harassment and bullying training. Oregon does not. So when I talk to those employers and I say, okay, now do you have a way to administer your Washington state sexual harassment training for that employee? No, I didn't know I had to do that. Super crucial that you make sure you know which employees, depending on where they live, or even in Oregon, what kind of mandatory trainings are required yearly or bi-yearly. That is, again, not something you want an employee to come back around, a disgruntled employee or whatever, to come back around and say, oh, well, I didn't get this training. Well, you're not off the hook for that. So just all those little nuancy things to keep in mind. This is why having either a resource to an HR platform or a library of information, or having that fractional HR kind of service, if you haven't hired internally for that, is super, super critical. Make sure that those things don't fall through the cracks, because you don't want to have to come around and make up for it later. So some key takeaways from today is that having your HR and payroll infrastructure dialed in, those are key for retention, making sure you're wanting to pay your employees on time, that there's no issues with that or deductions or anything that's not set up correctly, that you're following all the laws and regulations that you need to. And that employees know they have somewhere to go if an issue arises. And I think that's probably something, I didn't mention that earlier, but it's probably one of the biggest, right? If an employee comes upon an issue, an HR, a human resource issue, you want to make sure you've got a resource for them so they feel comfortable knowing that they can get the information or the help that they need. Plus, there's just so much that falls on the shoulders of an HR role, including benefits administration and things like that. Just it's good to have a strategy for how you'll handle that, right? Again, competitive benefits and retirement plans. Those are, especially as the workforce becomes more competitive and hiring becomes more competitive, it's crucial that those things are top of mind, that you've got competitive benefits and a good solid retirement plan in place. Again, with Oregon Saves, it makes it so that you don't really have to think about it. So that's really nice. But just as you grow and scale as a company, are you growing and scaling those benefits? Are you making sure that the things that you have to offer employees are keeping up with your company size, with the resources you have to give your employees, and with the competitive nature of our workforce? And then the third thing I would definitely say to take away from this is making sure you have those safeguards in place so that if anything were to happen to you or a business partner or whoever in the company that's responsible for major things, you have that plan, you have um, that that structure in place so that you're not taken by surprise and your company winds up falling flat because of something major happening. So it's good to keep those things in mind. It's again, some things are not necessarily fun to think about or plan for, but it's important that we do, right? We never want to see a company in this situation like we saw with our TechWorks company that was it just was not a good situation, and I felt very bad for those employees while they kind of all got sorted out. So um just to uh let you guys know, if you want to come hang out with TechWorks for the day, next Friday on the 22nd, we will have a rad work day. That is a casual co-working, networking, just kind of come hang out with us day. We have a lunch and learn discussion from about 12:30 to 1:30. I always make sure lunch is provided. This month, our lunch and learn discussion is financial wellness in 2025. So that should kind of actually go hand in hand with the conversation we've had today, making sure you're set up both professionally from a business standpoint, but also personally for the financial wellness in 2025. We have a couple of great partners coming out to help lead that discussion, who are very knowledgeable in both retirement plans and then financial planning and advising. And so that should be a really great discussion. If you are interested, we do have a sign up sheet, so you can reach out to me on LinkedIn or by email, and I'll make sure that that registration link gets over to you. And it's run from 10 to 3, but you do not have to stay for the entire session. You just come when you can. So it's kind of a you do you. Drop in, come hang out with us, and then be on your way if you'd like. All of my contact information is here. So if you have any other burning questions, and we'll have our Q&A, but if you want to get in touch or find out more information about anything we talked about today, go to our website or reach out to me by email or LinkedIn as well. Our TechWorks LinkedIn is on there, but I know Renee put my personal one in there as well. So either way, you can get a hold of me. So that is the content of information I have for you. And if you have any questions, now is the time.
Wonderful. So we don't have any questions in the chat. So I would love it if you do have questions, you can either put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask your question. While people get warmed up to do that, can you answer how does Oregon Saves get implemented when someone is hired? It sounds like it's automatic, but exactly how does that work?
Yes, so great question. So when you are when you get hired on as an employee at a company, and obviously they have to, your employer has to submit the paperwork for that. Then that triggers the state to send that paperwork. It's an automatic enrollment. I believe the employer is responsible for making sure that the initial enrollment is done, and then the paperwork is sent to the employee. And when you get the paperwork as an employee, then you have the ability to either say, yes, I opt into this. Well, you're automatically opt in, so you sign away on it. Or you can say, no, I want to opt myself out. And then you sign it and you send it. I think you can just give it to your employer and they can submit it for you. I believe that's how it worked last year when I was trying to opt out of Oregon Saves for my coaching job. But yes, it is handled by the employer, and then the powers of the state that be, and the employee gets to say yes or no.
Do we have any other questions? Well, it must have been so thorough that we don't have any questions for you. Thank you so much, Tara. We really, really appreciate your time and your expertise on this matter, especially as we got startups and all the business essentials that they need. Remember that when you leave this Lunch and Learn, that a survey will pop up, and I would love for you to fill out the survey. Also, check out our events on our website. So we would love to see you at some future events, especially before the end of the year. We have a couple of those coming up. Other than that, we will give you guys some time back in your day, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions. But yeah, great.
I think,
Thank you, everyone.
I believe I will be at the next happy hour in December.
That's right. You're going to be at the happy hour. So if you
Yes.
guys have questions, you can bombard her with questions there. And I think you even are going to talk a little bit. So great. We look forward to seeing you there.
Yes. Perfect.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Enjoyed it.
you.